of inviting Mr. Prithvi Shergill for valedictory address. Mr. Shergill is currently leading the HR team at HCL Technologies as Chief Human Resource Officer and is partnering with senior leadership to shape the business strategy, identifying human capital implications, as well as design and deploy people practices to enhance performance and productivity. He holds over 20 years of experience with companies like Accenture, AT&T, Vsauce, and Singapore Telecom. So please welcome Mr. Prithvi Shergill on the stage with a round of applause.
So thank you all for being here, and thank you for coming back. I guess as we wrap up the day, hopefully the sessions and whatever little I heard here earlier in the afternoon, as well as downstairs as I was interacting with some of the speakers, clearly indicates that possibly you've taken away all you need to take away from this session. So we'll keep this discussion open, and I'll share some of my thoughts on strategy and how it plays out in large organizations. Tell you a little bit of our story, and if that helps, we can use that as a reference as we have a dialogue about things that you're interested in. So the sexiest word that coming out of an MBA school, everybody wants to see strategy in their role description, and that sometimes worries me, because I think the ability to understand what strategy is and what that really means, everybody makes it sound much more than sometimes I believe it really is. At the end of the day, from my perspective, we all have a journey in mind. Whether you're an organization, whether you're an individual, whether you're a team, about going from where you are today to somewhere better, and that better you can define depending on your your mission or your vision that you have. Is it to be that better could be happier, that better could be richer, that better could be more profitable, that better could be bigger, that better could be more international or more global, and in various ways that gets defined. So going from your point, where the point of time or the place of where you are, point A to point B, each of us needs to have a plan or what I've started to basically see as a strategy to get there. But having a plan or having a vision about where you want to go as an organization usually is not enough. The bigger challenge is not I want to travel to Disneyland in Hong Kong, and that's my goal. But to get there are many things that have to happen in between. First of all, my son, who is 12, 13 years old, has to be as interested as I am, which nowadays, it becomes a whole different challenge, because he has different interests than me and that I think he should have. Or getting on a flight, or getting time to travel, or getting a hotel there, getting there, reaching there. When you reach there, you suddenly land up in the middle of a typhoon and you have to run away at 3 in the afternoon. Lots of things happen when you're going from point A to point B. And in organizations and in business, it is much more complex, because the world is, in my view, significantly changing. If you look at, I look at it in three aspects. If I look at the workplace today, to understand what the world is going to be, I think the workplace is changing significantly. Global delivery models from the industry that I come from are the norm. And I met a couple of your colleagues who were studying in soil, who worked at HCL before and are now doing their education here. And they will see that how integral it has become, that today work can happen anywhere in the world, is become the norm, compared to, say, even 3 to 5 years ago, where many organizations were still, were not as mature about this as the world has become today. The workplace is essentially has become much more distributed. That's as far as the workplace goes. The work in itself continues to become more complex. The way you do work, what work you do, the technologies you apply, the methodologies you apply, clearly become more and more complex as well. And last but not the least, the most important is, all of us in this room, the workers, the skills that we have also need to continually evolve and continually need to change to be able to deliver to the vision or the goal or the strategy that we've set out. So the journey that I was describing from point A to point B, I think has many more elements of uncertainty and ambiguity impacting it than that has been seen before. And as we sort of shape our strategies, I think it becomes important to ensure that there is enough adaptability, resilience, velocity, agility, whichever cool word that you want to apply as an adjective to it, is there in your organization or in yourself to be able to deal with all these uncertainties in the workplace and in the workers itself that you are working with to actually deliver on that strategy. So what I'm describing is, I think the world for a manager today, as he goes out and says, okay, this is my strategy, I'm going to sit in a dark room with some very smart people and shape it, is very different than when he walks out and he says, now let me execute it. I think that transition becomes much more difficult. So how are companies dealing with it? I think there are 2 or 3 things happening. Number one, I think we are starting to see a much faster feedback loop emerge in terms of actually looking at what strategies you develop and then actually deploying them and then coming back to relook at them, reshape them, and rethink what you need to do. So the ability to refresh, rejuvenate, reinvent yourself at speed becomes much more important. The work that the client is asking from us as a company at HCL changes much more dynamically than it used to. Earlier if you were looking at, you don't just get projects which say, okay, now you support this technology for me for the next 7 years. People are looking and saying, in the next 18 months this technology is changing, what are you doing about it? Are you going to give me benefit out of this? Are you going to modernize my applications at the same speed at which technology is changing? The people are saying, if talent in India continues to become more expensive or more scarce, are you going to go to the Philippines? Are you going to go to Vietnam? Are you going to go to China? Are you going to open up new centers closer to me? The workplace continues to shift on you. And last but not the least, do you have the capabilities that you need, both capacity as well as the ability? Unfortunately or fortunately, they grow at a much slower pace than what your business requires you to grow. Ability grows much slower. So the manager is coming into an environment in executing a strategy in a much more complex space. So what does he do with that? So how does one deal with that? So let me go back to my company, and I would suggest that one way to address this complexity is by looking at the management model that HCL has sort of evolved over the many years, and some of you may be more familiar with it than others. But if I go back to 2005, when I first started talking to HCL, I'm sort of the longest joining period ever for an employee at HCL, because I started talking to them in 2005, I joined them in 2012. So clearly my onboarding was very, very long. But when I first spoke to them in 2005, and I met Vineet Nair, who had just taken over as CEO, and he was looking at the company, what I heard and what I now understand much better, is that at that time the company was $700 million. It felt it had been a pioneer in the industry. Shiv has been one of the leaders and the sort of guiding lights of creating the software industry, the computer industry in India. But we had taken our eyes off the growth markets in our industry. And we were much more focused on R&D and things like that, while companies had sort of evolved much more in software services, and we had not sort of invested as actively there. So there was a worry that we were going to be left far behind. And I think that's the first step of executing strategy. Vineet started hosting what he called mirror sessions. And this became the first tenet in the management model that we used to execute our strategy. Was really to ensure that people understood where we stood, what we were good at, and why we were not so good at what we thought we were very good at. And maybe we'll come to a realization that if we didn't do something, our organization would not reach where it needed to reach. And that's, I think, the first piece around executing strategy, and after you've shaped it, is really making sure people understand the burning platform. Why is this strategy important? Why do we need a new strategy? What will happen if it is not there? I heard one of the speakers talk earlier about buying. That it sounds like a little bit of a salesy word to me, but it's a very important aspect. And usually you buy into something if you have awareness and an understanding as to why that is important. So from our perspective at that stage, the first thing around shaping a strategy was to really understand where we stand and really look ourselves in the mirror and say, what is going wrong? The next step really was, as people started to understand the urgency with which action was needed, was really to start saying, now you need to create a strategy, you need to shape something and get working on it. And I think the language changed very quickly to, do you have all the information you need to shape your strategy and execute it? Right? The importance of transparency became very important. So, importance of transparency became important, naturally. But the transparency became very important. What started happening was, we started ensuring that all our financial results were much more visible to people. After every quarter, we made sure that we shared that with employees. Our account management strategies, how we were going to grow our clients, were shared much more openly on the intranets. People were invited to visit those, look at those, and give inputs as to how those account management strategies could be improved and strengthened. And I think that phase of really increasing transparency helped people understand what the strategies could be to get out of where we were and go where we wanted to be. We realized very clearly that I remember conversations around a blue ocean strategy, and I'm sure you all have read these books and studied these. But clearly, if we were to go back and fight the momentum that the Indian outsourcing industry or some of the players in the outsourcing industry had sort of gained by then, we would not have been able to catch up. So the idea was to really look at large transformational deals, look at total outsourcing, total IT outsourcing, which was looking across all infrastructure and applications, and sort of operate in a space which was differentiated. And that happened because there was transparency and understanding of what needed to change. The third tenet that the management model that we sort of now come to know as employee first, customer second, really was about inverting the pyramid. I think and I think that to me has been the most powerful belief that ensures good execution. I think very quickly there was a realization that if HCL goes and sells its methodology or its assets or its processes, it'll look like everybody else, because everybody in the IT industry talks about CMMI 5 or this certification or that certification. what was really different was when what customers were telling us was that the difference is, and I've experienced this in my 2 years here, when I go and talk to customers, they say what distinguishes us is really that when an employee sits across from the table from HCL and he shares an idea, that idea in about 3-4 days somebody will come back and make a decision and say we're going to execute it. The same idea could be shared by somebody else, and that goes into a much longer drawn process of approvals, change requests, the reviews, decisions, and that speed to action is something that we have been passionately trying to protect. As you become bigger, it becomes harder because you start putting more and more guardrails and controls in, but you do want to retain that speed to market. And that we realize the best way to do that is by seeing who delivers that speed. It's at the end of the day the employee who is facing the customer. The value that is being added to the customer is by that employee. So we inverted the pyramid. And the third tenet was really around inverting the pyramid and telling the managers that your job is to engage, enable and empower our people to add value to our clients. And our strategy is simple, is really take innovation to our clients so that we build a stronger relationship with them, and that's what will help us grow. So we inverted the pyramid and said our job is to support the employees first and engage, enable and empower them. And there are various processes and practices that we were put in to make sure that that was done. Simplest one being any issue that an employee had, he could raise on a smart service desk and basically wait for that query to be closed. But the only person who could close it could be the employee himself. And things like this have helped employees say that somebody will solve my problems which I will have with the bureaucracies that work inside the organization, and there will always be many bureaucracies. So I'm not at all suggesting you're going to join organizations or you're in current companies where there is none. That's just part of being in large systems. There will be procedures, processes, methods, but somebody will address that for me while I focus on innovating for my client. And the last tenet that really has been talked about over the last many years is really recasting the role as the CEO, where we expected individuals to take ownership and accountability for what they were executing. So if you look at these 4 tenets of mirror, trust through transparency, inverting the pyramid and recasting the role of the CEO, which Vineet wrote a book about called Employee First, Customer Second. It's very easy for all of us to sit here and think about that as a people strategy or an HR strategy, because it sounds like that. And many of our employees many of them still think about it sometimes like that. But really from what I have understood over the last 2 years that I've been with HCL and through watching what I see in organization, it was really an execution strategy to drive change in a company which needed to significantly catch up and grow. And you can see it in the results. Today we've done about $5 billion a year in a calendar year, from being a $700 million a year company. Our stock value has gone from about 2.6 billion market cap to about 9 billion at the moment, and hopefully will continue to grow. Our revenue per employee continues to be the highest in the industry. If I look at our growth rates, if you go in and watch those growth rates over the last 10 quarters, you will see the outcomes. And a lot of that is credited to an understanding of these tenets and people making these their own. Now, I'll just spend a few more minutes on this and then we can open up for questions or a conversation. To say that these tenets were equally applied or equally adopted everywhere would be, sort of making, expecting pigs to fly. There are certain teams where these tenets are much stronger, are exhibited in a much more authentic and committed fashion. And there are places where it is not as committed. And there will always be differences. Because if there were no differences, then we would all be robots in this room, and everything would be exactly the same way. But we all bring to work different passions, different levels of commitment, different levels of intellect, different levels of work, and our job as an organization or as a group of people is really to make sure that we take where it is strong and make sure we support people where these tenets are not as strong. Over the last 2 years, we've had a CEO transition, and it gave us an opportunity to relook at our strategy and say, okay, this is where we've reached where we wanted to be. And Vineet had often said, even in 2007, 2008, that at some point he will move on. And when he decided to do so, we appointed a new CEO. We had an opportunity to relook at our strategy and say, what will we be in by 17? And one of the things we realized was, even though EFCS it remains a core in our company, what has really happened with EFCS is that it has translated into a movement inside HCL where we are seeing more and more what we started calling ideapreneurs, people who seed, nurture and harvest ideas because they believe that making change happen is part of our culture. And some, of course, are better than others, but if I look at the number of ideas executed by clients over the last 2-3 years, we are now currently tracking at somewhere close to $330 million of value over and above the contracts that have been signed with clients. So the strategy of driving change by putting the employee first to drive value for customers has really translated into a very organic manifestation of innovation which drives client value. And that transition in strategy has largely been because of a very strong belief system that many people have adopted. Some practice it more, some practice it less, but generally speaking, everybody who comes to work and is paid, we require them to sign up for it. People who come to HCL and volunteer their time can choose whether they want to sign up to it or not, and not many such people. That is how the culture has transitioned. We are starting to look at HCL now as the world's largest ideapreneurship, and that's become our strategy for going forward. Is to maintain our core belief in our management model, make sure that the behaviors it translates into is the currency we use for innovation, which is the currency of ideas, and make sure that we make people seed, nurture and harvest more and more ideas, because that will grow the value we add to our clients. And if we grow the value we add to our clients, the relationships with them will go much beyond the contract than just what is commercially contracted. I'll just wrap up by saying, for us, if you peel the onion of the story I told you, it's really about a person called Anupam who works at HCL and who worked for a client that does logistics and delivers products for an office products company, who realized that and HCL gets paid, by the way, on number of transactions that we support for this company, who realized that there was a certain product that kept coming back much more than others. And he realized that these were products which were needed in a much shorter period of time, 3 days versus 7 days. These are things like, if it's a printer cartridge or if it's paper, you're not going to wait for 7 days to receive it in the courier. You're going to go to your corner store and get it for yourself. You need it immediately. So he came up with a very simple idea. He said, let's start putting priority shipping for a certain set of goods. So he did the analysis and he realized that for a certain set of products needed to be shipped on priority. This actually lost revenue for HCL if you really look at it, because the number of transactions that were happening reduced, and it increased the cost for the client, but it increased their revenue as well, because they started getting much more acceptance and less returns started happening. And that's how you build a relationship which is goes much beyond the contract. He didn't need to do this. The client didn't ask him to do this analysis. It was not something that we asked him to do. But that's the way, in my view, that a culture really helps drive strategy. So if I was to leave you with one thought, is, you can sit in that dark room with many of the world's best experts, and we all have done, and really shape the best plan to go from point A to point B. But really what will get you there and will deal with all the obstacles in the way, from the typhoons to the customers wanting different work, or whatever else you're trying to wear, with whatever strategy, wherever you're applying your strategy, is really to have a culture which is founded on strong beliefs, where you're very clear of what behaviors are expected of people, and that translates into the right business outcomes, and you have the appropriate programs in place to support those outcomes. I'm going to sort of stop here, and we can talk a little bit further on things that you're interested in, but at the end of the day, for me, building the strategy is fun. And it's very sexy, and I hope many of you do it in many consulting firms that I'm sure all of you have, some of you have aspirations to work for. But the real value of growth as a professional comes in taking that strategy from that boardroom or from that conference room and actually applying it in the real world. And that, I think, is an experience that which is much more satisfying than anything else. Thank you all for listening. I'm happy to take questions if I can, or whatever else you'd like me to do.
Good afternoon. My name is Raj Balaji. I am with the Marketing Leadership Program here. Sir, you described strategy as a journey between where you are now and where you want to go. Like during this journey, I felt that knowing what not to do is as equally as important as what to do, right? So I want to know, as HCL as an organization, if you are considering these factors as well, like what not to do. Have you come to know and what not to do?
I think by making mistakes. I think if the expectation is that you will go into executing a strategy and everything will work perfectly, as has been drawn out on the PowerPoint, it won't happen. I think it's about how you treat experimentation, and it's about how you treat mistakes that happen and how you treat failures, and how quickly you learn from them and make sure that you don't make any of those again, and how you scale experiments that are successful so that you can benefit from them the most. Having said that, that's one way, and I don't think one should discount that. But really speaking, when you shape a strategy, for us it's very important. Whenever we planning something out, or what we want to do, we run what we call conference table execution, where we sit down and say, okay, you're the customer, you are the HCL account manager, you're the HCL delivery manager, you're the employee, and let's play the role out. So if decisions have to be made, let's talk about that around that table, so that we can visualize what will happen when we start actually making decisions on the ground. And you look at scenarios, and there are disciplines galore around scenario planning and making sure that you don't make those mistakes. So I'm not suggesting that you don't invest in making sure that you shape the right strategy up front, but I think there is much more value in learning how to quickly react from things when you fail or things which you make mistakes on, and correcting course there.
Good evening, sir. My name is Gokul. I am from BE Commercial Vehicles Limited. My question: you have shared some of the best strategy which you implement means formulating the strategy for HCL. If you could share some of the or any white space for HCL where it is not doing well.
So I think we have over the last few years got seduced by the by the growth that we've seen in some of our lines of business. So, our infrastructure services business is one of the world's leading offerings that we have. I don't think there's any client who would think about outsourcing infrastructure and wouldn't call HCL to have a conversation at that point. Our engineering services, which is our heritage, clearly also is one of the world's leading businesses that exist. And in India, we'd be the largest global engineering services company. And I think even globally, we've been the top 5, if I remember right. I think in some of the other businesses, we have seen that, like the industry has been challenged in application services or in enterprise services, we have also been challenged equally. And I think those are areas we are now realizing that we need to strengthen quickly, and we need to relook at some of our offerings, relook at what we're doing there, so that we can take advantage of the upswing as it happens in those areas as well. I think we've sort of tracked the industry growth rates in those areas, but I think we could have done better, faster, earlier. But I think those are some things which we hope, have the journey ahead and the opportunities ahead to do.
Good evening, Mr. Shergill. My name is Ashok Ghosh. I'm from Rip City. It's a software company. So I had a couple of questions for you. The first one was that you are doing a lot for employee engagement. Like the employee first, customer second, and other things you're doing. Now, however, what seems to be important is that every company have a purpose, right? And it's from the purpose flows the strategy and the vision and all that. And it's the purpose that employees buy into, which creates that sense of engagement, regardless of whether the times are troubled or it's smooth sailing. If the purpose is like like a true north, right? So you keep going in that direction, right? So I was wondering if you have, does HCL have such a defined purpose? And the second, if I may ask the second question also, the second question is that the salaries, the wage bill in Indian software companies is rising at a rate faster than the customer is willing to increase his rates to us, right? And then you have the pressure of, like you said, setting up companies in Philippines, or maybe one of the other speakers said it, in the Philippines or other countries where the labor rates are lower, but the skill levels are as good as India's skills, or maybe even better. So how are you handling that situation?
So in terms of purpose, I think we have recognized that the purpose that has emerged from our history has really been around ensuring that we are seen as the CIO's or the CXO's best friend, to make sure that the agenda that we carry in our relationship goes beyond the contract, and that we actually are supporting our client's agenda. And that really is and that can be done by ensuring you continue to add value. So there is a concept that so some time ago has been articulated at HCL about the value zone that gets created between the employee and the customer. And the purpose really is to continue to enhance that value zone, increase that value zone in that relationship or in that interaction. And I think most people either intuitively or explicitly understand that. And that's what drives them, because they know that when that happens, the organization grows, which in turn leads to their growth. Their contributions are recognized, which in turn leads to their employability and their future success. So that linkage, I think, is very well clearly understood, and that's really what I would articulate as a sense of purpose, which I see quite prevalent across the organization. With respect to wage bills, I think you need to remain competitive. in the marketplace. It's about demand and supply. So if you're looking for certain skills which are getting more in short supply, you will have a wage growth. The answer to that is really looking at fundamentally seeing how that work is done. Can you do that in different ways? Can you do that with different skill sets? Can you do that with different capacity? And for organizations, they need to continue to evolve that, which is what I was talking about earlier. I think the way work is done, the way the worker is going to, the skills he's going to need, I think those are fundamentally changing. And one of the reasons for that fundamental shift is to ensure we remain competitive in tomorrow's world. So unless we continually seek more non-linear ways of delivering that work, or look at different sources of talent, or look at different reward structures, look at different employment agreements, look at more freelance work, subcontractor work, more different mix, more geographic, more widely spread geographic spread. All these are levers to manage the issues that you described you're facing, and organizations are, who are in our industry who are looking at that proactively will succeed. Those who are thinking that we can worry about this next year will find themselves on the back foot.
Hello sir, my name is Ashish Jain. I am from Business Leadership Program in SOIL. So my question is the same. I am adding on that question. So before Indian IT company went to America during 1990s, again the US companies were giving IT support to those companies. They were adding value to that company. Then came Indian IT companies, whom were low cost, but they were not sure will add value or not. And people company took a risk on that, and now Indian IT companies were booming after that. Again, there is a scenario when there is one more player which is coming up, which is either in terms of China or Philippines. Again, companies are not sure whether they are going to add value or not, but certainly they are the low cost as compared to Indian IT companies. So, isn't it that the cycle is rotating, and we can't go only that we have the value, that's why the company will stay with us? Or is it something like, for example, what Infosys did is that they invested in China, they opened a branch in China, and I think they hired some 2,000 people from China itself. So Indian IT companies, I think, are going towards China and Philippines and thus taking out job from India. So how do you feel this scenario?
So as I was saying earlier, I think the workplace strategies that you need to execute to are changing. You need to be in places where the talent exists at the right time, at the right place, with the right skill, at the right cost. So you need to do that. So most Indian IT companies today have presence in China. Question to ask is, how are they scaling? How are they doing? And that's a separate conversation we can have at a different point of time. But to your earlier commentary around, are you going to continually play the cost differential, or are you going to play the value game? Which is exactly what my whole story was about. If you look at what HCL strategy has been, is really to say that the way to add value is to provide the worker and the employee the license to ideate, the freedom to make decisions and the freedom to act and execute those actions. Because if your currency or unit of growth is an idea, that's what translates into value. Value is not always about, let me solve world hunger for you as a client. Let me solve your biggest issue. The value comes when every day the 10 people working in my client, the 1,000 people working on my client are actually adding value. The value comes when our project managers in that project carry a goal which says that I will add value 2% of the commercial contract more than I have contracted with you. And I will find that value from my employees' ideas and not from the work that I've contracted with you. That will be over and above what I have committed to you. That's how you grow, that's how you retain your relevance. If you continually play the cost card, you lose.
Yeah, hi, this is Krishna from iDreamCredit.com. We are a startup in education vertical. So I came to know that HCL is also into HCL education, HCL learning, right? So what's your take in K-12 segment in education vertical, and how is the marketplace in the education department for class 9 to 12 probably in career counseling platform?
I would love to comment, but fortunately or unfortunately, HCL Technologies is not in that business. That you're referencing HCL Infosystems, which is a separate company, part of HCL Corporation that does work in those areas. So I would hesitate to put my opinion out there about them, but I'm sure that their strategies will work and they will be successful as well. So you should invite somebody from HCL Infosystems next time and he can share his views about that.
Thank you.
Hello sir, my name is Astha Agarwal. I'm here at the HR program at SOIL. So I would like to know your views upon the bell curve, the enforced ratings on the employees. Is it an effective or an ineffective strategy in such a competitive industry? So do those employee first strategy actually create that pride in the employees, or is it going very well? I'd like to take your views on that.
So it's very close, it's a subject very close to my heart. So who all are going to see this video? So let me tell you, we've just gone through a huge transition in HCL. So we've moved from a 4-point scale to a 5-point scale. We've moved from a very a curve which leaned towards the positive side significantly to a much more normal bell curve. And I think the how you distribute your performance, how you look at performers in your organization depends on the context in which you're operating. At a particular point in time, you may wish to be much more differentiated in terms of your performance. You may want to ensure that you're reinforcing meritocracy much more. So the need to shift from an absolute assessment, which is what you're describing, to a more relative assessment, which leads to the bell curve. If you don't do a relative assessment, you will not get a bell curve. You will still get everybody leaning towards the positive side. So it depends on the context in which you are. What is the kind of workforce you have? What is the kind of skills transitions you need to make? What are the kind of workers you're looking for in the future? What are kind of technologies you're building and what sort of capacity you need? So there are various factors which influence how you look at performance at a point in time. And your performance management system needs to be tailored for that context. So we used a 4-point scale absolute ratings till 2 years ago. Today the number of people who ask me that question at HCL is the highest I have ever had in my career, because over the last 2 years we've shifted from a 4-point scale to a 5-point scale. So the number of people who send me emails about Microsoft relooking at it and so company relooking at it, I'm very educated on that at the moment from employees, because it's not comfortable when you start moving to a relative assessment. But in my view, life is all about relative assessment. He's very good, and I'm sure she's very good as well. But at the end of the day, when there is a decision to be made about who to give that next assignment to, you will make a relative assessment saying, are his capabilities more or are her capabilities more? And I think we might as well recognize that reality rather than try and make too much of something which honestly we will continue to evolve. So if you ask me, will a normal curve stay in every organization? Is that the way to go? I disagree. I think some organizations will find it of value for the period of time they are in, and some will not. It's important that your people practices reflect the needs of your strategy at that point in time. So to expect that any design of a practice will stay constant or any strategy will stay constant is living in a fool's paradise.
My name is Nitesh Agarwal from Business Leadership Program. I have a question. I recently came across an article of Vineet Nayar's in which he says Indian IT sector is losing its relevance because it's an age of digital revolution and Indian IT companies are just ignoring it. So what is the HCL strategy on it, and how are they cashing upon on it? Is it a kind of blue ocean strategy for you?
And I think we recognize that early, and I think the fact that Vineet is an integral part of the company. Fortunately, we've been talking about this for much longer than maybe others have. So we've recently started offering what we call digital systems integration for our clients, which goes right from modernizing applications to looking at the data fabric, to looking at analytics and business intelligence from using that data fabric that gets created by modernizing your application. So there's a cycle to this about how you execute, how you transform a company to be more, to leverage the digital revolution more. And I think that's something that companies are going to have to look at. We are very actively investing in that. And again, as I said, I think that's a need of the hour. If companies that don't do it will lose their relevance, I completely agree with that comment.
Hi Prithvi, I'm Aruna.
Hi.
Is there a need for continuity in strategy? When you transition between leaders, say from a Vineet to Anil, and they have different styles, is the strategy execution part which changes, or is it also the creation and the formulation of strategy? And if so, where is the continuity in strategy?
I don't think I think strategy has to reflect the current context and the future scenarios that the board and the leadership team foresee. What has to stay constant to ensure that the strategy gets executed in as effective a manner as it has for, at least for us for many years, is our belief system and our culture. I think if we can retain the strength of our management model and the tenets around EFCS, and people can continue to apply them in their place of work, and we can continue to build on the culture of ideapreneurship that we are committed to, I think the strategies will continue to evolve. Whether we do digital systems integration, or whether we do application support, whether we do infrastructure services more or engineering services more, what is the mix, how do we build our business services more, those things will continue to shift depending on what clients are telling us about the work they're looking for. But I think what needs to remain is the glue that drives execution, which is really the culture of the company. And I think that's the responsibility of leaders, to make sure that the culture continues to stay strong, while the strategy of what you want to do, where you want to invest, how you want to go from point A to point B will continue to change. Thank you so much. Thank you for your questions. It's been a pleasure talking to you all, and I wish you the very best.
From this point of view, giving example of how HCL demystified its strategies, gave several crucial insights. One that is important for me is that culture drives the strategy, something that Soil also teaches us strongly. May I request Mr. Anil Sachdev to give a token of appreciation to Mr. Prithvi Shergill. Let's have a round of applause, guys, for Mr. Prithvi Shergill.
In a lighter way, I heard a statement that culture eats strategy for breakfast. You may have heard that term earlier. So fortunately for Prithvi, the kind of culture HCL has built is the one which makes the strategy a resounding success. In fact, it wouldn't be out of place to mention that perhaps the success of their strategy comes from this very innovative culture that HCL has had right from the time it was a very small company, and it's grown over the years and reinvented itself many times. And I think just when we know that they've got it, they've reinvented another time. So it's very interesting.